I showed you earlier how former Labor Minister Joel Fitzgibbon says Labor needs to pull back on its climate ambitions or probably lose the election. I caught up with an energy expert today from the Heritage Foundation. Jack Spencer says Australia simply can't get to net zero and have a viable economy without nuclear power. Jack Spencer, thanks for talking to us. President Trump has declared an energy emergency in the United States. What is the problem?
Well, the problem is the United States has suffered under an anti-energy agenda, quite frankly, for 4 years, and we're starting to see threats of blackouts and other man-made, literally man-made, policy-made energy constraints, and we had to do something about it. We were just headed in the wrong direction. The energy emergency will give the president certain authorities to start to clear the decks, the regulatory obstacles to begin changing our policies more towards an energy abundance agenda.
And in his flurry of activity and executive orders, the president has taken America out of the Paris Agreement. So net zero by 2050 is gone as an objective for the biggest economy in the world. Surely that's going to flow on to other nations.
Let's be honest. Net zero was never the objective of anyone. It's a bunch of virtue signaling. What President Trump did was said, we're not even going to virtue signal anymore. We're going to do what's best for the United States and for the rest of the world, frankly. What we see across the world is the most prosperous, the freest, the ones who have the most access to affordable energy are the ones that have the cleanest environment. If you want to reduce CO2, you don't do that through a heavy regulatory burden or international agreements with Paris. You do it through prosperity by developing natural gas, nuclear power. Even, a lot of people don't want to talk about it, a modern coal plants emit far less CO2 than a traditional coal plant. So technology is the way you reduce CO2 if that's what you care about.
You mentioned nuclear. If you want reliable energy that is emissions free, surely nuclear is the answer, and even the Paris Agreement, even the Paris countries are doubling down their efforts to deliver more nuclear.
Yeah, there's no question. Nuclear power emits nothing into the atmosphere. If you want to reduce carbon dioxide, that's certainly key to doing so. In fact, I wrote a book on this exact thing, that nuclear energy, we have 70 years of safe operations. Clearly, nuclear energy is the answer to reducing carbon emissions, but not just that. It's the answer to energy security. It's the answer to energy reliability. We need to get the economics right, but I think with some regulatory reform, nuclear energy has a very promising future ahead of it.
Can any modern economy get to net zero without a substantial input from nuclear energy?
Absolutely not. Not a modern industrialized economy that gives both families and businesses access to the affordable, reliable energy that we all need. You can't do it without nuclear energy if the objective is driving towards net zero.
What about cost? There's a big argument about going to nuclear energy in Australia, at least in part, and the main argument against it is saying that it's the most costly of all the energy alternatives. How does that stack up in the real world?
Well, a couple of things. Existing nuclear plants are extremely affordable, but they are expensive to build. That's not to keep coming back to my book, but that's why I wrote this book. What we see is that nuclear power is way over. It's not just over-regulated. I would argue that the regulatory burden around nuclear power is antiquated. It's the way we regulate nuclear power harkens back to before we knew about it, before we had 70 years of safe operations. It's an extraordinarily safe energy source. We should regulate it for sure, but regulate it based on the actual risk profile, based on what we actually know about the technology, and not based on what our unfounded fears might be. That's how you bring costs down. I'd also argue this. Whenever politicians and bureaucrats start off an argument with something costs too much or it's the most affordable thing in the world, we should be skeptical. Free enterprise is the way to arbitrate what the cost of something should be and whether it costs too much or not enough. I say get the politicians and the bureaucrats out of the way and let all these energy sources compete. If wind's the best way to go, it'll win. I suspect it won't be, but let's let all energy sources compete.
Nuclear energy is currently banned in Australia. Can you believe that a modern economy like Australia could actually attempt to get to net zero on a renewable energy plus storage model without nuclear?
It won't if what we care about, or if what Australians care about, is maintaining economic growth, industrial capacity, standard of living. All of these things, you just won't be able to achieve them with intermittent sources like wind and solar. You need what's called baseload power, which nuclear energy provides. That's the power that a society, a modern industrial society, needs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Nuclear can provide it. Wind and solar just can't.
So is it affordable for a country like Australia?
It certainly can be. I mean, we see countries like the United States, France is a great example, Japan, South Korea. They're modern, free market capitalist societies around the world who rely heavily on nuclear. So absolutely, we can. The South Koreans are building nuclear power plants at reasonable prices, at reasonable costs right now. You just need to free up the regulatory environment to allow that to happen.
Jack, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.